Rob and Slim Show. Can you hear us, Mike?
Hello there. Yes. Hello.
Hi, how you doing? Mike Burton from the Genuine Chit-Chat podcast.
I am doing very well. I mean, I'm in the UK now, so it's midnight. So I think everyone that I know is probably asleep by now. But I'm doing excellent because I don't really sleep that much.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I always wonder.
One
I'm
or
like,
two.
I know that this time for you guys is the best. When I usually book people from the UK, I usually offer this time slot because it's still earlier than the alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys had invited me on almost any time, I would have made the effort to come in. It's just on weekdays, my girlfriend normally goes to bed a lot earlier than I do, so I normally stay up and play video games or read Star Wars content or edit podcasts. That's
Nice.
normally the stuff I'm up doing late.
What games do you play usually?
I'm like, I was joking with my mates the other day. I'm like 2 years behind everyone. So I used to be really into games in like college and stuff. And then when I started doing podcasting, I'd take a bit of a back seat. And I've been getting my girlfriend into video games and stuff a lot more. So we've been playing Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, and
I
then
haven't played that yet.
I'm 2 missions away from 100%ing Spider-Man, as in the old one. So like, it's so
the
so
PS4
delayed.
one or
Is it the one? So like, obviously, Miles Morales thing is out like today or tomorrow or something.
Yes.
And so it's just weird that I managed to 100% it literally like the day before the newest one comes out. And I've been playing.
Cool.
I love Doom as well, and God of War, Jedi Fallen Order, Witcher, lots of them. It just takes me ages to get through them.
Yeah, I just got a PS4 this past year, so I'm behind too. So yeah, I did. One of the first games I got was a Spider-Man. That game was amazing.
Just web swinging. It's just I could just do it for hours. Just it's so therapeutic. Just going around, and then occasionally it's like, oh, there's a bad guy around. It's like, wait, I get to beat the shit out of people while swinging around as Spider-Man. That's the coolest stuff in the world.
Oh man, you're just over the pond, Mike. But what part of England are you in?
I'm at the south of England, so the place is called Southampton. Fun. It's basically London. If you go south by about an hour and a half driving, that's where I am. It's almost like the butthole of England. Not literally. The place is nice, but at England, right at the sort of southern part near the Isle of Wight, there's this crack that goes up the bit of England. That's basically where I am. Other famous things: the Titanic stops by here, so we all know how good that story is. We've got a nice little Titanic museum for the greatest venture in nautical ships, of course.
It was all right when it was here. That's what they say, I think. Yeah. Well, we're New Jersey is like the armpit of America. So we're in the armpit. You're in the butthole.
You're the crack.
So yeah.
We're the really weird. When you go to the darker parts of porn, I'm at the sort of entry level, and you're in the fucking deep end.
Right. That's about it.
Oh man, and as an outside observer, how do you see America, the shit show that has been America in the last 4 years?
Oh, well, I mean, we've got our own little Trump at the moment, Boris Johnson. I would say he's not quite as bad, just to clarify. But
I need to look him up.
He looks a lot like a sort of Trumpian. He's genuinely not as bad. I want to clarify, but it is interesting because I've my other podcast, Star Wars Comics in Canon. It's on the feed of a podcast called Comics in Motion. It's like a different podcast every day of the week, relatively. And one of the guys in there, he's American, so we're all English, and we just hear from him like, "Oh God, you've never know what's happening here," and it's crazy. I mean, obviously everyone's in the pandemic, and then you've had the whole Black Lives Matter movement, which a lot of that caught wave over here.
Yes,
and
I saw that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm happy for Black Lives Matter and the support a lot of the people got, and I've got some friends in America who, people of color, who have said that seeing across the world Black Lives Matter movement, it really meant a lot to them, because obviously people may not know this, but in the UK we don't really have at least the same amount of problems with police brutality.
Right.
Not to get into a really dark, deep thing, but over here it obviously would happen. It does happen. There is a degree of police abuse and things, but it's not the same amount as it is over in America. So over here, we're just kind of, a lot of us look over in America and are just like, okay, it's crazy as fuck over there. Over here, we get the diluted version of crazy. So you've got like Trump, and we've got Boris Johnson, and you've got the massive Black Lives Matter movement, which is this huge thing. And over here, it's like a much smaller thing. So it's a weird dynamic, and it's crazy to see you guys over there. But there's, it's when I was a kid, I was like, yeah, I'd love to go to America. It sounds cool. And now I'm like, Ooh, how much do I want to go to Galaxy's Edge?
Why don't we wait? Why don't we wait?
Boris Johnson, was he like a celebrity at some point, or
Did he have a show, or is
did he have a TV show?
just a politician?
No, unfortunately not. I don't think, to my knowledge of recent, we haven't had. All of our politicians are too standard, like air quotes, the standard white guy. I know there are politicians in England that aren't just standard white guys. I'm overgeneralizing, but it is the way you'd imagine a British politician to be.
Right.
That's basically what they are. But there is quite a fun thing for your listeners to look up, and it's Boris Johnson on a zip line or zip wire, and he was doing this celebration thing before he became prime minister, and he gets stuck. And he's just there on the zip wire on top of this huge crowd with sparklers
cool.
and a helmet on, and people just start lobbing stuff at him. It's pretty amazing.
Nah, he's cooler than Trump. There's that alone.
I don't know.
Trump hasn't done anything cool like that. So.
Oh my God! How long have you been doing your show though, for Mike, or your shows? You mentioned you have 2 of them, right?
Yeah, what I'll say with the flagship show is Genuine Chit-Chat. I've been doing that now for over 3 years. So I've like 1 or 2 weeks a year, I don't release an episode, normally around Christmassy time and if I go on holiday or something. But generally every episode is a new guest. I've had a wide variety of different people on, filmmakers, musicians, authors, other podcasters. Some of them are just my mates that I fancy having a conversation with. And then my other show is, as I said, Star Wars Comics in Canon. I think I've only been doing that really... It was about a month or 2 before lockdown, so it was kind of in a good way. Not to say the pandemic was good, but like of all the times I decided to start a podcast, it was like, oh man, how am I going to find time to get this all started? And then boom, oh, I've got infinite time. Huzzah. So, but a little bit before that, I did other creative and air quotes stuff. I made music videos for a couple of small local bands. I did a YouTube show with a mate of mine for a little bit, but that kind of simmered out. So it was just. All my mates tell me I talk far too much, so instead of just like verbally waterboarding all of them, I just decided to do it to the internet.
Nice. And I wanted to mention, you do have a wide variety of guests, and how do you connect with them?
It's a mix, really. I mean, some people I find information about them, or someone tells me about them, or just occasionally I'll just see someone on like Instagram recommended to me or something like that, and I'll just go, they're cool, I'll hit them up, fingers crossed. Other times people do contact me, and I don't say yes to everyone, but if they seem interesting enough, then I'll often entertain them and have them on for a period of time. Sometimes it's sort of collaboration things, so a lot of the time I like to, if I do a guest spot on someone's show, often I'll invite them on the show. So this is my cordial invitation that whenever you guys fancy it, we can organise it another time. You two can come on my show, and don't worry, you can swear as much as you like, because I know how much you guys love doing that. So
I
do.
fucking love it. It's my
vulgarity.
fucking favorite.
Don't even realize I do it half the time. Just F this, F that.
Is that that's a universal thing? I feel like that's not just strictly American. I feel like every culture loves a good curse word.
Yeah, I mean, with Britain, we've got this weird thing where it's like we're quite repressed in a lot of ways. Like everyone likes to. A good parallel to show is kind of we have the TV channel BBC, and that's not the main one that everyone's got essentially. And there's something called the Watershed, and it's basically at about 9 p.m. everything goes from like PG, PG and before to like R-rated, and it's this thing where it's like before it's like 8:59, everyone's like, oh yes, quiet, Downton Abbey, everyone speaks like this, prim and proper, and then as soon as it gets past 9:01, it's like, oh fuck it, I mean, let's go down the shop and kill them. It's like literally 2 minutes of that, and that's how I kind of view England, which is when the lights are on, we're all quite prim and proper, and then as soon as the lights go down, you get a drink in us, or you see any English people on holiday swearing constantly.
Once those kids are in bed, then we go stabbing.
So see, I always imagine, because like we do like fuck and asshole and dickhead, and I just assume British swearing is cunt, cunty, cunty, cunt, cunt, cunt.
Or way more gentlemanly, like, ooh, you fucking cunt.
Oh, this fucking cunt
I mean, I'd like to call myself gentlemanly. I'm not sure anyone who's ever met me would call me that. But it is funny because I think BoJack Horseman, they kind of touched upon it in things as well, where it's like in England, if you say cunt, a couple of people are like, oh, I don't like that word, and you shouldn't say it like at your job or when they're children or anything. Yeah. But generally speaking, most people, if you say cunt, they won't really bat an eye. But it's not. It is still like the worst word you can say. But you go to Australian, and I've had a couple of Australian guests on. They say cunt like every few words. It's amazing.
They call their buddies cunts. They're like, hey, you cunt. Yeah, they call everybody cunt.
I love it. It's just cunt is just one of my favorite words. I mean, fuck is one of the coolest words ever because I think it's the only word in the English language which can be used as a verb, an adjective, and a noun.
It colors sentences.
Yeah, you pepper it in everywhere.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask too, Mike, the discussions. You guys have a lot of discussions on your show. Do you come up with them, or do you just free flow with your guest?
It does depend on the guest to a degree. I generally do a few notes. I've got like a notepad, and I normally write a few bullet points and things. And then, depending on how comfortable I am with the guest, like if it's a guest who is a podcaster, they reached out to me. Generally, the conversation is going to flow quite easily. And if it's someone who's specifically trying to, if they've got a new book coming out or something coming out and they're marketing it, it's normally like you only need a few footnotes and you can kind of go from there. But there's other people who are less confident, shall we say, that you kind of have to lubricate the conversation a bit more in a way where you kind of have to guide it. I've had a few guests that really great conversations, and you wouldn't be able to tell by listening to the episode, but you do need to kind of work at it quite a lot sometimes, because sometimes it will be like, oh, when do you do blah, blah, blah? And they'll be like, I do blah, 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 when blah. And you're like, okay, on to the next question.
Yes, I was going to ask if you've ever had that where, like, you have that one guest and, like, every answer is just so quick and so short and they're giving you nothing. We've had a few of them in the past, and it's so hard sometimes.
It can be difficult. I've only really had, like, 2 or 3 guests that are like that, but that was primarily due to I could tell they were quite shy in a way. So I would not name drop or anything because that would be kind of cruel to do.
I wouldn't expect you to.
But it is one of those things where I try my best, like before the record button gets hit or anything. Obviously, I don't do things live. I'm not as brave as you guys. But it's before the button goes live, I do speak to the guest and I do just say, okay, we're going to go through this. You can swear as much or as little as you want. If there is anything that you say and you're like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that just for any reason, I always offer to edit it out. I have never had to, and hopefully I won't in the future. Normally my editing process is normally just cutting out hearing me breathe or like the odd lag, when you ask someone a question and the latency makes like 2 seconds and it sounds really awkward if you don't shorten it, but it's not awkward at all when you're in it. It's things like that. But generally speaking, I'd say pretty much all my guests I've enjoyed speaking to, but there are some which are like, you could just ask one question and then that's basically it. I do want to say I had a mate of mine on who's got a podcast as well. His name's Scott Weatherly of the 20th Century Geek. There you go, plugging him away. And he came on my show. It was the episode I just released, and we were meant to talk about the author H.P. Lovecraft, because I don't know much about him. Obviously, I know about Cthulhu in general, and I know that he's a big author, but I don't really know anything about him. So I was like, okay, come on the show. We've been looking for an excuse to have you on, because we've done like a few collaborations and stuff in the past. And we're like, cool, we'll talk about H.P. Lovecraft. And the start of the conversation, we started talking about science fiction crossovers and special effects, just like some of the cool things like Mandalorian and Ghostbusters have been doing with the new technology and stuff. And we ended up for 2 hours and 15 minutes talking about all of those things and didn't even touch the subject that I wanted to initially start on.
That's great, though. That's great, because then you could always go back and do it again. And
that's exactly our plan. Yeah, it's quite a good thing when you've got like loads of footnotes and you barely touch any of them, because it's just a great excuse to have them back.
Yup, that is, and just it's always great when you have that person you could have that conversation with, and it could be amazing every time.
Yeah, exactly. And out of interest with you guys, like, I know this is mainly I'm the guest here. I shouldn't be asking you questions, but I want to ask, what is there something that made you want to do a live show? Because obviously people like Rogan started doing live, and I don't think he does it anymore. And it's quite a brave thing to do, because obviously you're on air and stuff. But I didn't know, did you guys specifically set out to do live? Or I'm just intrigued because I haven't really met many podcasters who have done live shows.
Yeah, so we wanted to do radio, and radio is live. So that's like when Rob and I first met. Our conversation wasn't, hey, you want to do a podcast? Our conversation was like, hey, you want to do radio? Radio is live. So that's,
I had previously worked in radio, and I just remember, Note Editor and all those things, and like we were pretty good too. Slim doesn't edit much. Out of the actual interviews, I don't think he edits anything, unless, like you said, there have been here and there where somebody's like, could you cut this out? Like, and we'll do that for somebody, no problem. But for the most part, we're pretty good.
But it was always the interesting thing of like morning radio, where like those guys don't edit; they're just live, and they're good enough to have a conversation. So we were like, we could just do that too, and what we talk about is what everybody hears, and that's that.
One of the things I love about your show is it's got great energy, which sounds like kind of almost like a cookie cutter answer, but it's just you tune in immediately and you've got all your crazy like radio sounds on. It feels like you're really in it and you're just so enthusiastic. And one of the things I love the most about it is how much fun you have, because you occasionally hear people on the radio, even sometimes podcasters, I won't name any names, but you sometimes hear a few and you're like, are you actually doing this because you enjoy it? Because you sound like you're being forced to do it. As you guys, it's like, it almost doesn't matter if the mic was on or not. I could tell that you guys would just be like off on one in the best of ways.
I remember at one point I was like, I forget how many years ago, I was like, I don't know if it was that I drank too much and I didn't remember, and I'm like, do I even have fun? Like, am I an asshole? So I rewatched an episode and I was like, no, this is cool. I'm not as much of a dick as I thought I was.
One of the things I despise the most and you can hear it right away when somebody's doing it, is people that are overly prepped and are trying to appease other people. We've never do that. We're never looking at like, hey, what do our listeners want? We're just like, nah, we're just gonna turn the mics on and that's the thing. But there's a lot of radio and podcasts who seem to think too hard about what they need to do to appease other people. And I think that's not the right way to go about things.
Yeah, and it's also, you get certain people, like I've a couple of times I've heard like a podcast, and, oh, that's quite cool, and I've contacted them and stuff, and the first thing it goes, oh, so what's your numbers? And I'm like, well, if that's your first question, I don't even want to fucking talk to you, because it's like, when I contact guests, I don't look at their numbers or their Instagram followers, any of that shit. I just go, it's basically, my podcast is, would I want to have a conversation with you without a podcast? Yes. Well, that's what I want to have you on. Like, my podcast is a good way. It's like an excuse. Because if I contact some of the people I've had on the show who are people who are maybe best-selling authors or something like that, you think, oh, I want to have a conversation with you. If you just contact them and say, hey, do you want to chat with this random dude over Skype for 2 hours? They're like, no. If you go, hey, I have a podcast, there might be people listening. People are like, okay, that's a good excuse enough. So it's like, that's my sort of thing. It's just any excuse to talk to people I find interesting.
I love that.
Pop on the internet.
And just going back to that, I mean, you could, we have 12,000, I don't know, on Twitter followers, but our episodes get like 100 listens on Podbean, but then it's also like 50 other places. Some of those places you don't even have, like, I don't know, iTunes, there's really no way to track listens on there. There's so many places you don't even know, like, how many listens you're getting and all that.
Yeah, because it is a weird one, because I applied to, there is a guest that I won't say who they are, but it's something to do with Star Wars, who there's someone to do with Star Wars who should be coming on my show in early December that I'm very excited for. And then I contacted them. Their agent said, oh, you need to pre-submit the questions because Lucasfilm need to approve them, but also what numbers do you get? And I was like, oh shit. And so I was like looking at them and I was like, it is kind of hard, because there's like, I upload to Podbean and that does get a few of them, but there are lots of like Acast. I submit my thing to Acast, but I have no idea what the numbers are. And there's lots like iHeartRadio and lots of weird little places, or like, no one listens to my show on YouTube. I get like 2 to 10 listens, and it's like, how you get other people who are just podcasts only on YouTube, and I'm like, how do you get anyone to listen to you? I don't get it.
YouTube is a hard grind, man. We could have some of the greatest interviews with like 4 listens on it. Like, it's crazy. But you know what I like to say, Mike? I like to say 25,000. I just throw that out there. Yeah, we get on all that combined, it's about 25,000 listens per minute. I like to say that.
That's amazing.
Every single person on the whole planet always listens to the Rob and Slim Show. Okay, heard it here first.
Mike, I got a question. So I love British television, like certain things, like the UK Sherlock was great. I love Darren Brown, who's a magician. Love fucking Darren Brown.
I've seen him live a couple times.
There was a series that I loved called Being Human. The UK version was great, and then we as Americans try to adapt all this stuff, and then after watching the British versions, I go and try to watch these US versions, and they're awful. Like Being Human, the UK version was amazing, and then I tried watching a little bit of the American version, and it was awful.
It's always been the case.
I don't know, like, I was curious if, like, do you guys have things that are like, oh, I love the US version, but the British version sucks? Is that a thing?
I'd say there's a couple of shows over here which people have tried in the US. There's a show called In-Betweeners, which is a massive,
I like In-Betweeners.
I've
seen that. Yep.
It's incredible. It's hilarious. And that show, I think they tried to do it over with you guys. Yep. And there's a thing in In-Betweeners in one of the episodes, and it's like bus wankers. That's like a funny thing to yell at people. It went around for ages when the episode came out. And the American version was bus douchebag. And you're just like, that just doesn't work. And there's certain things like that. And you're like, just don't try. And Skins was like that. But the biggest thing that causes the most amount of arguments is The Office. Now, the UK Office with Ricky Gervais, there's 2 seasons of it, and a Christmas special. And that's where Martin Freeman started out. If anyone doesn't know who that is, Bilbo Baggins is probably, or like the guy from Sherlock who isn't Benedict Cumberbum. He started on there. Ricky Gervais is obviously fairly popular. And the UK Office, I do enjoy, but I actually controversially prefer the US Office. Obviously,
I've heard
Steve
that.
Carell and all that
People
jazz.
say that.
But the thing is, they're very different shows because I love Michael Schur, who made Parks and Rec, The Good Place. He's had a hand in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the US Office. He's basically all that American comedy. There's like about 15, 20 shows in America that a lot of people in England love. But the US UK Office is one of those things where a lot of Americans are like, oh no, the UK Office is infinitely better, but the US Office is overrated. And then there's a lot of English people who are like, oh no, I actually prefer the US Office. And I think it's just a lot of it is an age thing.
That's one of the exceptions I've heard where people say the American is either just as good or better. I think even Ricky, like at the beginning, like shouted out the American version, how good it was.
The American one, obviously, it's like I've seen it all, and it's like 9 seasons. And the first season is basically just a bad copy of the UK one. But once they took a step away and they were like, hey, let's do our own thing a bit, that's when it really started to shine. Series 2 from like 7 is gold. But the thing is, there are so many episodes. And one of the funny things I find with American shows, not just comedy, is that as a comparison, like over here, we've got a show called Peaky Blinders, and that's like 6 or 8 episodes per season. Whereas you guys, for example, with like, as an example, the Arrowverse of DC stuff or Vikings, things like that. There's like 24 episodes per season. Yeah. So you guys are like, you have like 18 hours of TV per season. And we've got like 18 hours for the entire box set. So it's a weird thing where you guys just seem to, you want more content. I mean, I guess there's like 5 times more of you, so maybe that's kind of the point.
We need that big throbbing content. We need it big in our face.
That's a good point. Like the UK Sherlock was like 4 episodes a season or 3 episodes a season, and I think we tried it in the US, and it was like, here's 24 episodes that nobody's ever going to see or care about.
Elementary, I think it was. And the main guy in Elementary, Johnny Lee Miller, he's actually in a cult film, which is Trainspotting, which is one of the early films that Ewan McGregor sort of started in, a few others. Yeah. And it's just quite funny that it's like, hey, we've got the American version of Sherlock, basically, but the main guy is from a British film. It's like, I'm sorry, what's happening?
Oh, goddamn. That's good, Mike. Mike, we have to wrap this up, but it's been a blast fucking talking to you, man.
It's been really good, and what I'm saying is that what we'll have to do is we'll speak to each other on social media, all that sort of jazz, and I'll have you guys on my show whenever you get a free moment to breathe, and we can have a nice long, like normally my shows are like between an hour and 2 hours, generally depending on people's time and schedules and shit. But it'd be really cool to have you guys on the show to talk about your show in a bit more in depth, and we can just have a good old chinwag without having to worry about timings or being live or anything like that. But I really want to say thank you so much for having me on. I do really appreciate you guys.
Thank you. And you do like the American version, like we do the 25-minute interview. You do the American like hour interview, like
okay. I gotta ask before we hang up though, because Joe Rogan does that, right, where he does like 3 hours a person, and I've always thought like, do you start to get like annoyed with somebody after like the hour mark? Are there times where you're like, I can't talk to this person for 3 hours?
I think the longest podcast I think I've had is about 2.5 hours. I generally, when I speak to people and I have them on the show, especially if I haven't had them on, I tell them, it's between 30 to 90 minutes. And I just kind of vaguely go, depending on, like, I don't really explicitly say what. And what you can kind of tell normally is it's basically at the half hour or so mark, it either peaks at half an hour and then dips, and then you've probably got a show for about an hour, or it continues to accelerate, and then the hour mark is the peak, and that's when you've got like a long show. So you kind of have to gauge it as it goes in a way. But yeah, it kind of depends on the guest, and sometimes it just depends on my mood or how tired I am. So I had it before, just a quick thing where I had someone on my show, and we only planned to do an hour, and we had such a good time. I invited her on, and she came on like 2 episodes later. We had another like hour-long chat about something completely different. So it does depend.
Nice. Mike, where can everybody find you in your show?
It's on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, all that sort of jazz. It's Genuine Chit-Chat. You can find me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as Genuine Chit-Chat. And then my other show, Star Wars Comics in Canon, can be found in Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, on the feed of Comics in Motion. But if you have any trouble at all, just find me on social media, Genuine Chit-Chat. Ask me any question you want, and I'll direct you wherever you need to go.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
No worries. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, too.
Have a good one.
Have a good night, Michael.
Cheers, guys.